Hey guys, Nick Wheeler here again at Wheeler Custom Knives. So this is a continuation for the handle shaping series on the Joe Paranee project, the fighting Bowie knives. In the last video, we took the handle as far as I would normally take it on the powered equipment, and now we're going to go ahead and move on to the hand tools. And this is one of my favorite parts in the whole knife making process. This and forging, probably my two favorite aspects of making these things. A quick overview of what we're going to need. Good solid bench vise. I've said it many times, I'll say it again. One of these rotating head multi-position vices coupled with a simple shop built knife fixture, I think is priceless, because it allows us to fixture this knife in any position we could possibly want. Then we're going to need some files and a file card to get started on the handwork. I literally have hundreds of files in my shop. They're just one of those tools, I don't know, I guess I got a kink for them. I just don't think you can have too many of them. I've got them in various places. The ones that I use the most, I try to keep handy in these blocks that are on the bench. Storing files is a real pain in the ass because you don't want them clanging around, banging up against each other in a drawer. There really is only a few ways I found that works pretty well for storing them. Either make some stuff that'll hang them by the handle, or something that's pretty easy to shove the end of the file into and will hold it there in place for you. This block is something that I have had in the shop for a long time, but I just recently modified it a little bit to hopefully work a little better for me. And the files that are in this block are the ones that I use the most when I'm at this bench. That and some of the little ones in the blocks behind me, some of the chainsaw files, and I don't like them, but I even use the needle files sometimes, so those are all stored behind me. But what's in this block, these are what I use the most, and out of what's in this block, there's a small handful of files that I use a lot on shaping handles. And if you need to add some files to your shop, especially if you watch this and you think, hey, maybe I want to try one of those, I would recommend that instead of going to a brick and mortar shop and buying something that's readily available off the shelf, you go on eBay and look up new old stock files. Especially one of the best examples I can think of is Nicholson. I hate to say it, but Nicholson for the longest time meant quality. It was a quality brand, and they were one of the biggest names in the file industry, and I think that they deserve that. But in more recent times, they've outsourced things to other countries, and the quality just isn't what it used to be. I'm not saying that they just are awful and horrible or anything like that, but they're definitely not the quality that they were even when I was a kid. So if you can, jump on eBay, look up new old stock. Like I said, Nicholson is the one that always comes to my mind first, because there's a ton of different styles, ton of different cuts. You can find a vendor that's selling stuff that's new old stock, like from the 50s or 60s. It's almost guaranteed it's going to be a good product. Not trying to plug that website, but it's just trying to help you guys out. That would be my recommendation if you need to add any of this stuff. Before I give you a more detailed look at the specific files that I'll be using for the handle shaping on this, I want to take a minute and point out that if you're just starting out, it's a great idea to read up on files, try to get a better understanding of the different styles, the different cuts, different applications for them. I think that's all helpful info that it'll give you a good foundation to learn from. But I also want to say, don't get too hung up on this stuff. I got started when I was 12 years old. I didn't know all the differences between all these things. The files that I had access to were files that were out in a drawer in my dad's workshop, and I just used what was there, and it got me started. And 24 years later, I'm standing there in front of you guys making videos about how I make knives. So my point is, it's good to learn this stuff and try to make intelligent choices and decisions about what you buy and how you do things, but don't get too hung up on the fine details. You have plenty of time to learn this stuff and refine your process, you know, and grow as a craftsman. But the most important thing is to just start doing it. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at the files we'll be using on the Paranee knife. These ones right here are what I typically use most often on a handle like this. One of the most important ones is this right here. This is a 3/8 inch diameter, coarse cut round file. This was a new old stock Nicholson. As you can tell, I've got a golf ball shoved on here for a handle. For certain operations, these are really nice because they're short and they're secure grip and they're comfortable. For some things, I don't care for them, but obviously I have it on this file. One of the other ones I wouldn't know what to do without is a 6-inch half round. This is a real basic file, but I use these a lot in shaping. This is a replacement to one that I've been using, was using for 18 years, and if you have a knife of mine from that time frame, then that other half round was used on it, guaranteed. So that gets used a lot. This is a 8-inch half round, again with the golf ball. Don't use this one near as much as the 6-inch. And then this was a 10-inch bastard cut file, and I didn't need all the extra length, and so I chopped it off short, and then I ground and polished a safe edge on one side of it, and I use this sort of sweeping away from the guard into the handle. This is just a finer cut file. This one doesn't have safe edges. It actually has radiused edges on it that still have the teeth intact, but having the radiused edges, they don't you don't have sharp corners that will bite into curves. So this is a really handy one to use. And then I'll mention this one, even though I've only used this on a couple knives now. This is by far the most expensive file that I have in the shop. This is called a crossing file, and it's sort of like two half rounds stuck together, but instead of having a flat on one side and radius on the other like a half round does, this actually is radiused on both sides. So you have a curve to both sides, but one is a larger radius than the other side, and then it also, as you can tell, tapers down to a very fine point, and those two things combine allow you to get into real tight spots. And this is a nice file for like our recesses and then our guard to handle transition. But I was hesitant to mention it because I've only used this on a couple knives. I've done many knives without this file, so this is not a necessity. Now, I know it'll be really hard for some of you to believe, but I actually will not be doing a ton of talking throughout this video. And the reason for that is pretty simple. There's really not a whole lot to explain. Basically, it will just be following along as I shape this thing and try to refine the lines of the handle and, you know, clean everything up, true everything up, and just ultimately get it closer to what it's supposed to be. There's a couple things worth mentioning. The file only cuts on the push stroke, so if you happen to notice me flipping the file around in my hands, that's because sometimes I feel like I have more control doing a pull stroke, and you need to have the file backwards so that you're still cutting against the direction of the teeth. I don't know if I do that a lot because I'm left-handed or why, but sometimes I just feel like I have more control. And then you'll also notice I'm pretty particular about removing the swarf from
the area that I'm filing, and that's basically just the filings themselves. You don't want that stuff to sit on the part, because first of all it'll gum up the file and it'll slow the cutting action, but it will also sit there and collect in the teeth, and it can actually gall and cause gouging in your part, which obviously we don't want that. So I try to be particular about removing that. So that's about it, really. If you would like to follow along and see this thing uh, come into a more refined shape, feel free to tag along.
The sides are actually radiused, and that helps to keep from digging in when I do this transition here, since we have a gentle arc in here.
This is what membership does. Get started with an American Express Serve card at Safeway today. No restrictions apply. Go to serve.com for more details.
I wanted to stop for a second and show how dramatically this changes this by chewing this up with files. Still have a ways to go here. There's sort of a dip right here. This needs to be taken down to remove that, but see, there's been a lot of material taken out on this side compared to this side. this is one of those areas you really got to watch, because you want this to be a nice smooth arc in here for two reasons. One, that's what's going to feel the most natural in the hand, and two, we want a nice smooth finish on this material. And any material will show it, but G10 is really notorious for, if you have any weird little discrepancies in here, any weird little dips or waves, it'll show up in a finished product really bad. So you got to make sure that stuff is really smooth and finished out really nicely. Okay, at this point we have two that are at different stages. This is the one we've been working on in this video. Most all the hand filing and stuff is done. This one above it has been taken to the rough shape on the grinders and no filing yet. From this distance they probably don't look a whole lot different, but if we take a closer look, you can see that the one on the right, the guard lugs have been thinned down, and there's been a whole lot of material in here, excess material that was taken off. And then our overall shape has been refined, and our recesses have been thinned down, our swells have been trued up. If you take a closer look at the transition at the guard, that's been, I would say, at least 90% completed with files. And so I go over and do a little tiny bit of touch up with a slack belt on the 2x72, just on this whole area, and then we'll do a finishing operation on the sides of the guard and the front of the handle here, and then we'll go ahead and move on to hand finishing. But at this point, like I say, most of the shaping and everything has been completed, so this handle's getting really close on this one.